We are now on the slide of types and indicators of abuse and neglect. On physical and sexual abuse, there are some obvious and some less obvious indicators. When we're looking at rough behavior, you may see kicking, beating, hitting, but grabbing is one of the very common indicators. You may find bruising, and there's some excellent bruising studies out there. Again, Dr. Laura Mosqueda was one of the leaders in the bruising studies. You may find unwanted sexual contact. That may be more difficult to locate. But confinement and restraint are also part of it, or indeed touching without consent. The indicators are listed to you in the next slide, and I won't go through all of them because they are listed there for you. But you can find marks on your body, internal injuries, bruises, lacerations. Those tend to be more obvious. Less obvious may be things like broken assistive devices. To a person who has a mobility impairment, a broken cane is a form of abuse. Having that cane broken over the actual person is two forms of abuse. There may be untreated injuries, including the sprains, fractures, and dislocations, or there may be areas of wounds which are due to bed sores or other forms of inactivity. Itching and bruising around breast and genital areas are often indicators of sexual abuse, as are trauma responses. Look as well for things like venereal diseases or infections and bleeding. Those are common forms of indicators for, again, sexual abuse, and may be the entranceway to lead questions. We know that there is often inadequate time spent with our medical professionals for seniors, and often rare inquiry around whether abuse and neglect is taken. So working with the medical profession to help to have the conversation is part of the Counterpoint Project, which is the materials that you have in front of you. Some forms of emotional and psychological abuse are listed here, but they can include shouting and bullying, insults, name-calling, threats of violence and abandonment. It can talk about being humiliated or harassed. Infantilization is treating the older person like a child, or isolating them as well is another form. Some of the less obvious ones include inappropriately infringing on privacy, so making them keep the doors open when they go to the bathroom, opening up their mail, listening into phone calls, monitoring contact in different ways. Threats of violence and abandonment often go hand in hand. Many older adults may feel like they have nowhere else to turn, or they don't want to go into some form of long-term care, so they're willing to live badly or willing to live with some abuse in exchange for what they perceive to be a better condition. I would offer that it is rare that living in an abusive situation is better than the alternative. But if people are willing and able and cognitively able to understand and appreciate living at risk, many older adults may choose to do so. Providing appropriate support and assistance is then what we need to be doing. The threats of keeping grandchildren away or harming pets is another form of common psychological and emotional abuse, and is often one that works very, very well. So if there are expressed concerns about the grandchildren or pets and animals, if there's concerns about whether or not they might be in risk or the older person may be cut off from access to them, that's another form of conversation that is important. So indicators you'll see here is heightened levels of agitation and upset. There may also be what looks like depression, hopelessness, guilt, feelings of withdrawal or actual withdrawal from family or friends. So that may be when they feel themselves being disconnected, or it may be the fact that they are in fact disconnected. Certain levels of heightened anxiety if areas of questioning is pursued, and a general reluctance to speak about the situation. This may be often found to be diverting, so you may try to have a line of inquiry and the person may try to change the topic time and time again. If that's the case, it is often an indicator that is worthy of consideration. Financial abuse. We know that Power of attorney fraud is a significant area of abuse. And we also know that joint accounts are one of the most common forms of abuse. What many people do not realize is, and we'll talk about this later on in our course when we talk about financial issues a bit more, when you put things into a joint account, it doesn't mean you own things 50-50. It means you both own them together. So if you and your mom put money into one account together, for instance, $100,000, and you are on the account and your mom is on the account, neither of you each own 50-50. In this case, you both own $100,000, and you both are legally able and correct to completely withdraw it. Joint accounts are often suggested at the initiative of a financial institution. Sometimes professionals will offer to have joint accounts as an abuse or joint ownership as a way of avoiding probate. Probate tends to be about 1.4%. It changes a little bit across the country, but it's a very low amount. And I would offer that there may be some reasons for estate planning to put things into joint, but if there are issues of abuse and neglect, it is one of the most common forms of abuse. There also may be just exploitation, theft, and scams. Some indicators: unpaid bills are really common, or that people all of a sudden don't have the money for basics. You go over, there are not medications, food is not in the fridge, hydro may be unpaid and cut off. You'll see that things that they ordinarily were doing, they were no longer doing. There may be unexplained relatives visiting or a new best friend. There may be a power of attorney granted under unusual circumstances, concern that the older adult may not be capable of doing that, or they may be unduly influenced, or they may have been outright bribed or threatened into signing some form of power of attorney document. The adult may be complaining that they don't know where things have gone or how. There could be significant changes in wills or new appointments to lawyers made or notaries. New accounts may pop up or old accounts may disappear. You may also find that the person who is ordinarily helping to support the older adult is no longer doing so, or there may be a change. It used to be the nephew and now it's the niece. With the nephew, bills were being paid and the older adult seemed like they had what they needed. Under the niece, that may not be the case. We're going to speak in our next section on neglect and self-neglect in our next mini lecture.